Hi, everybody. Welcome to the USA CLO 5.0 webinar, new feature release, where we're going to go over all the updates. Happy to have everyone who's with us today. So to start, I'm going to go over just some interface updates and some additions to the program itself. So first, in the library window, we have consolidated some folders. We used to have a separate folder on the outside for pose and all the avatar assets. But now the avatar folder, if you click into avatar, we have new avatars, and then the avatars have been separated into folders that have the assets specific for them. So now if you want to use the hair for a specific avatar, you have to click on that folder. I'm using the avatar named Kelly. She's one of our, oh, I'm sorry, not Kelly, Mara. She's one of our new ones. And so I have assets here for her. So that's a pretty simple update to just help make the library window a little bit shorter and smaller so you don't have too many folders piling up. The next important thing to point out is the downloads update. So as of up until recently, every release, you would have to re-download all of the new assets that were included at some time ago. But now, as of this release, you should not have to, you should not see a little N to download stuff here. It should already be included with the new program. And then now, as time goes on in new releases after this point, you will just have to download anything additional. So anything that has been built up will already be with the program. And next, I'm just going to point out in our help section at the top bar of the window, we've added the community section. So now you can go to community and go immediately to the Q&A or tips and tricks or these different sections of the website. It'll link you directly to them. And then a couple of the things that we'll go throughout showing each different feature. In the 2D window, we now have a new toolbar for different pattern things or 2D display options. So a lot of the things that were in the right-click menu, such as show baseline, show grain line, show pattern name, have all been moved into a menu over here, as well as some extra things added and some different fabric views. Transparent views used to be a tool that you would show and hide, but now it has been nestled into a show and hide option here. So this was done to kind of declutter basically the right-click menu, and then there were a couple tools that we were able to nestle into here and allow more space on the toolbars in general. Okay, so now I'm going to start going through the new features and different updates for existing features. So the first one that I'm going to show is called GPU simulation. This is a really exciting update that makes the program run a lot faster. It is only available for Windows currently, so this is basically how it works. In CLO, we have different simulation modes, and generally people are working in normal. Normal is the one that we've had always available and complete nonlinear, but I'm just going to demonstrate the speed that the fabric will move at when I'm on normal simulation. So I've hit my space bar and turned simulation on. You can see our little arrow here. And I can pinch my fabric and start moving it. So you can see the speed that it's going at is pretty slow, and we're having some collision going on as it moves. The general volume of the fabric here and just how much is going on in the window is making it just run slower. This is normal. This is what we're used to and how we've been working. But now there's a new simulation mode that runs at kind of super speed. So if you hold down the simulation button and select simulate GPU, it will not be available, or it will be grayed out if you don't have the option. You also have to have a certain graphics card level or higher, but when you click on it, the arrow will change. And I'm going to demonstrate now the speed at which this moves. So this will really allow you to work a lot faster when you're styling or creating details. I can basically, it's almost complete real time, and I don't have a lot of collision issues. So I'm going to add a little pin and make it look like she's holding up her skirt. So this is not a finalized mode that you want to work in. If you can kind of consider it a draft work mode and utilize it for speed and drape development, but for accuracy and bit check, you always want to move back into normal or complete. The graphics card level, that's the minimum for this to work, is a GTX 960 or higher equivalent. And again, it's only available in Windows, and this should not be used in animation mode. It will be very unstable. It's only for kind of this working mode. Yeah, so that's kind of it for the GPU simulation. I'll move just back into normal. So we can kind of see the speed that we've had available prior. Okay, now I'm going to move on to showing the new avatar editor. So this avatar editor is only available to be used on the new avatars. And to get to it, you go to Avatar, Avatar Editor. Okay, so the new avatars, you can adjust them by measurement. You can jump between which unit you'd like to work in. And generally the best way to use this is as follows. So we have some total circumference and height areas here. We have total height and bust circumference. When you're increasing or decreasing and trying to kind of get a new body shape, generally you want to first adjust the overall width to like the widest bust that you might want to have. So I'm going to increase that. And for the height, a little taller. So once you've adjusted these two general areas, then you can switch to the advanced. This might be on basic when you have yours first open. So at first it's going to say basic, and I can go ahead and adjust. I have a reference that I'm going to follow. I'm going to go smaller. I'm going to increase my cross shoulder. And if you want to go into more detail, you can switch to the advanced option, and that will open up more specific areas for you to adjust. There are more measurements that you can actually see, but you cannot edit. This little icon here is called Show All Measurements. And if you click on this, it will show you some interim things that you can't actually adjust as a user, but maybe you might want or need to know them. So here we have that option. After you've made any changes to your avatar, you will always want to click on the Arrangement tab and click on this Update button. Seems like it's big enough. And then again, to save this changed avatar, do File, Save As, and save it as an avatar. But that's kind of the basics of the new avatar editor. So the next feature that we have added is an option called Convert to Avatar. This is a thing that will kind of help you use or reference an avatar that you have or an existing OBJ of like a body scan and turn it into an avatar like ours that is rigged, and you can use the hair and the shoes. So to do this, you click here at the top where it says Avatar, and you go to Convert to Avatar. Okay, this window is going to open, and you are going to import or look for an OBJ. I'm using an avatar file, but this can be an FBX or an OBJ. I'm going to click on it and choose Open. And the next thing that you have to do is choose the gender that matches the human that you're trying to use. So in my case, I have a male that I'm trying to adjust, and I'm going to just choose one of the males here, Thomas, and hit Next. So what's going to happen is two avatars are going to appear into the window. They're going to be kind of stacked right on top of each other. Move this so you can see. And it's going to also be immediately in X-ray joint view. So it does as good a job as it can to adjust our default avatar to kind of hit the reference that you're using, but you're generally going to have to do some manual adjustments after that point. And that is why you're immediately in the X-ray joint view. So from here, I'm going to I turned on what's called Human IK, so I have a little bit more control of my joints to stay moving like an actual human. And then you will have to adjust and move some things. And you'll likely have to open the avatar size editor to then adjust your avatar. So I see in the background, this is actually the original. I would want to make mine a little bit taller. Oh, sorry, other way. Mine is taller. I'm gonna go shorter. Okay. So we have the height similar. Okay, so once you've kind of done your best to get that more in the vicinity of your reference, then you can just click on convert. So when you click on convert, it's going to take a moment to process. So once it's finished, you're going to get this message pop up that an avatar has been converted. And again, you cannot use the size editor on your new avatar, but then I can click save as avatar and then just save this so you can use it in the future. Just a disclaimer, as you might be able to see from what you're witnessing, is that this conversion is not 100% exactly matching the OBJ that you've referenced. It does a pretty good job, but it's just another option available for you to be able to have more versatility with the sizes that you may want to work with. And then also after it's converted, the thing that becomes available is now you can use the assets that come with that avatar. So the shape may be different, but then I can use the different options here available. See if he has any hair, and he doesn't. Okay, now I'm going to move on to our tech pack option. So tech pack has always been available in Closet, which is our one of our web services. But now there's an option to basically directly import your project into Closet and simultaneously create and generate a tech pack with whatever information that you have in that project file. So I'm going to open up a project that I have. So for this to work, you have to have a Closet account. It's completely free, and you can create one at, the website is www.clo-set.com. And once you create one, there's a location where you can actually store your Closet login. So there's a little button that's like send to the cloud. And when I click on it, I have to add that. So you can add that information and then just hit close. It'll be saved in there. So I have a project file where I have some dress that's cut up into all different pieces. I have different fabric. And I laid out the fabric that I do have onto rolls. Some of the widths here. So after you've done all the work, just resaving this quickly. To create your tech pack, you will hold down this little button, so the cloud that says C, and then towards the bottom you'll see tech pack via Closet. I'm going to click on this. Okay, I think we can all see my Closet now. Sorry about that. So when you click on create tech pack, it's going to launch you into Closet, and it's going to ask you to pick which workroom you want to add it to. So you can just click on a workroom and then hit next. And basically you just sit here and wait for this to process, and then a tech pack will be available for you to download. I have already just prepared the tech pack, so I'm going to open it and just show you what I had previously downloaded. And if you've already used Closet, you probably have seen this already, but then it'll take images of your front, back, and side view and separate them onto a front page, We'll have a cutter's must with different information that will be filled in. So if there were any trims or any seam allowance, that information would show up here. Your colorways will get separated by, it'll show the fabric and what the yardage consumption is. A spec page available for you to fill out if you choose to use it, and then your colorways is just kind of all the views laid out. So that's now just there in CLO for you to use. I do encourage people to make a closed set account and use it. It's kind of like a Dropbox, but for our 3D files and any other files that you want to share, and it's free. So, okay, we're back. Sorry about that, everyone. Rough. Okay, back and moving on to new render properties. Thank you for your patience. So in rendering, we have now added glitter, gem finish, like jewels, and the ability for light illumination. So first I'm going to show glitter. These 3 properties or visuals are things you are only going to see in the render window or in a render preview window. So when you select any of the materials and you set them as these types, you're not going to see it in your 3D window. So how we usually work when we're using this and developing what we want the visual to be is with the actual render window open. So I'm going to open that here at the top, just render, drop down, choose render. And this is what I was previously working on. I'm just going to hit refresh so we can start seeing our image. And first I'm going to go through glitter. So I have this garment here. And the glitter is applied as a material type. So you would select your fabric here. And then where it says type, we've started adding the silk satin, velvet. These came for some of the past few releases. And here now we have glitter. So when I select that, I'm going to explain kind of the parameters that you can work with and how we've used it and experimented using it. So certainly we don't see any glitter right now. I'm going to stop and then hit refresh on my render window. Okay, so we're going to start seeing kind of a little bit of glitteriness. It's very small. And there's that you have to work with our color and number. So the number you can think of as like density or how spread out or how much glitter is going on. So the lower the number, the more sparse and spread out the glitter will be. And increasing the number, the density of the glitter will make it cover more surface area. The general range is really from like 0 and it goes almost to 4,000. But we recommend about 200 or below. So right now I'm at 100. Once you start getting to the high hundreds, like 900 or 1,000 or above, it doesn't really look glittery or speckled anymore. It starts to just look like a sheet of shininess because the glitter is so dense. But just to demonstrate, I can stop and restart. So here I've set my back inside to not show as glitter. So I show that only on the front. And so I've just set the number for the glitter density to be, you see 900, and you see how it really just looks shiny now. It doesn't look so much like glitter. So to keep that speckly look, again, 100 to 200 is a good range to work with. And then the color is basically there for you to choose. White or gray will look the most like a rainbowy glitter or kind of just like a silver glitter that is commonly used. But if you change that, then your glitter will basically be that color. When we've experimented with it, like so here, if I choose my glitter is white, I'm going to change it to red. it doesn't really pop as much because it's now just reflecting red and its base is red. So to keep it contrast, kind of white is the best thing to just keep it as. And when you have this, when you are using a color, even if you're on like a blue, if that value has a much higher number than the others, you're really not going to see any like red or green. You'll just, blue will dominate, or if the red is the highest number, red will dominate. So that's why white has an even number for all the colors, like white or gray, and it looks the most natural as glitter goes. And just to show you, I have pre-rendered, I cannot share them. Maybe at the end I'll show them. I have some renders that I made with glitter that came out pretty nice. Okay, next I'm going to explain light illumination. So here at the top, I have some objects that are lamp objects. And the way that you can change them to illuminate is by, you just select it. So I have it clicked. And then we're going to have a material type in the property editor. And you can change that to light. I'm going to stop this and refresh it, and you should see this middle bulb now actually look like it's on. Okay. And then the thing that controls the brightness is this area here called color mult, or color multiplier. And low is one is a pretty low number. The higher the number, the brighter and more luminescent that will appear. So I'm going to stop it and just restart it. And you see now that this light looks a lot brighter. The opacity doesn't affect the light at all. So changing this won't make it brighter or darker. But that's kind of the only parameter that you have when you're playing with the light property is the color multiplier. One of the simpler rendering properties that we have. So now I have a nice glittery dress and a nice lit up lamp above it. And then next, for the third render property, I'm going to show you how to adjust for a gem visual. So I have a little jewel that's on this hanger. I'm going to zoom into it. This is a button that's been stuck onto there. And I'm going to click on my button. So this is the button or the area that I'm going to set to have the gem property. Okay, so that's it for the additional visual properties in the rendering. Next, I'm going to move on to some new lighting options and the advanced camera settings that have also been added to the render engine. So I'm going to open up another file. So this is pretty exciting. It's a pretty big update to the render visuals. And then the advanced camera properties are some fun things to experiment with. Okay, So again, to demo this, I'm going to use the render window open. All right, so first I'm going to explain the lighting options that have changed. So before now, we did not have these advanced lighting options. There was only one light in the 3D window that was from above, and now we can have up to 4 lights, control all of their locations, as well as the color that they output. So I'm going to turn the original light that was in the program and is still in there is now called the dome light. So if I check this off, basically you've turned the light in your workspace off. So I'm going to turn that back on so we can see. And now we have 3 additional lights available. So I can check, I'm going to just check one on at a time. And I'm going to turn off the dome light. Okay, so now we can really see and understand what these rectangle lights are doing. Here in this file, we actually have kind of set up this prop just for a little fun, but you can actually show the lights. So I can check on. When I turn that on, let's move around our 3D window. See, I have this. It looks like fabric, but it's not actually fabric or anything. So I can turn that on and off. So there. So I'll turn that one on, and then you can change the size of the light source. So here we have width and height, and also the color, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to turn all 3 of these rectangle lights on. And then if you change the color, you will have that color light going onto your workspace. Okay, so here in this case, I do not have the dome light on. I only have the rectangle lights on. And when the dome light is on, this is where you have the option to import an environment map or a environment file or an HDRI file. Okay, and one additional thing that I can cue you in on here. So we've added the option to render strictly off the GPU here in called render properties. There's now CPU supporting and low GPU priority. If you have time to spare and you you still need to work on your computer and you don't immediately need a render, if you switch to this low GPU priority, the render will take longer to process, but it will actually free up space for you to continue working on other programs directly on your computer. So you will not be able to keep working in CLO or the CLO file that you have open, but you can still then run like Photoshop or Illustrator and have that minimize and still be able to work at a normal pace. But it will take much longer, but the quality will be equally as good, and that's now there for you as an option. So it's called low GPU priority. Okay, I'm gonna turn these lights off, turn my dome light back on. Okay, next I'm gonna go over the advanced camera settings that have been added into the program. So this is so the lighting control or the exposure can be more akin to photography terminology, or if what photographers are used to. By default, you are not going to be using these properties. It's going to be off, but you can turn on the ability to use the advanced settings. So once you toggle that on, you're going to now have ISO, F number, shutter speed, and all of this stuff kind of pop up and become available to you below. The ISO, the F speed, and the shutter speed, they all are related to light exposure and how bright your image will become. The ISO can actually affect a noise number, like how much noise you see in the image. And they work together, and they have a relationship that varies depending on the situation. I can't fully explain their terms kind of in depth. You can learn about them if you kind of just look them up. But I can tell you that these kind of are standard and don't need to be messed with a ton. Like at the 100 is a good number to have on for your ISO. And the shutter speed is actually kind of irrelevant right now because it's more pertaining to motion. And that will be added in later, which is why it's now here. But you can play with these numbers and look up exactly what to adjust in the CLO manual. But what is kind of fun to play with is this thing called depth of field. So if I turn that on, it will allow me to show something that's in the foreground is very in focus, and what's behind it very blurry, or vice versa. And it allows me to control this as a user. So I'm going to just get a good view here. You're going to check it on, and then once you turn it on, if you do not check this focus by left click, it will just focus in the center. But we do recommend using this. It's the best way to just control where your focus is happening. Now, when you turn it on, I'm going to click on this pole thing in the back and ask CLO the render to focus on that, and kind of it should blur out once it starts moving away from that focal point. So in this case, actually, my jacket will become blurry. I'm going to click, I'm going to stop it, click, and then hit preview. So I'm going to let that image develop. I actually clicked in this gray space. It's not looking so nice. The result of this is going to vary depending on what's actually in your view. Like if you're very, very close and zoomed in on something, the blur is not going to show up very prominently. Okay, so now I'm getting the result that I kind of expected. I targeted on this hardware stuff in the background, and you can see that it's very, very clear. And in this case, the jacket is blurry. So that is the depth of field and the focus distance that you can control. Just so you know, this focus distance number, it automatically changes depending on where you click. So if you go in here and start just typing in manually, it's kind of hard to control. I don't recommend it. It's just a number there for you to reference if you know specifically how to use it, but it's really better to just click and let this auto adjust to find the target that you're asking for. So that's kind of it for the render updates. I'm going to exit out of my render window and now go on to kind of grading changes, 2D updates, 2D improved features, and material updates. Okay, so first, one option that was added is that notches will now automatically show up on seam allowance. So I'm just in one blanket move going to apply my seam allowance everywhere. And then here you can see that the notch automatically duplicates onto that edge. Before it didn't, and this was clearly a problem. So now you have that there to cut. Now I'm just going to explain something about the notches. So the notch, you can change the length here. If I click on, this is our notch tool, you click on the notch and then you will have length. You should be able to adjust this. But that's a pretty easy update, easy to find. Select your notch and you should be able to adjust the length of it. Another thing is just a visual preference about the notches changing size when you zoom in and out. So now if you go to preferences, settings, user settings, click on 2D, and then there's this area called notch display type. We have length fixed to screen or actual length. So when you click actual length, here if I zoom in and out, the notch does not grow or scale, or it does, it does grow and scale as you zoom in and out. But if I go to settings and instead choose length fixed to screen, now it does not get larger and smaller as you zoom in and out. This is really just a personal preference of whatever annoys you less. So the next thing I'm going to just go over is the right-click menu of the 2D background used to show a lot of things like show baseline, show grain lines, but now that's all been moved into here. Also, we had a show sewing tool icon that was actually in the toolbar, and that's been moved to here. So if I click this, I can see sewing. You can hide top stitches, hide puckering. For the 2D pattern display, now show baselines is here. Seam allowance is here. Grading is here. What is this one? 3D pen marks. I'll demonstrate that later. Reference lines and symmetric instances. We don't have any of that here, but it's actually been moved here. And then we have a 2D information display. So names, annotations, line length. This is Shift Z. A lot of people accidentally hit it. Show grain line, grain direction. And now we actually have the addition of rulers and guidelines. So here I can click show ruler. And it's similar to Photoshop and Illustrator where I can pull up a ruler and I can pull basically lines out from it. So these guidelines can exist for you to use. And there's also the option to select any 2 points anywhere and ask CLO to create a guideline intersecting through those 2 points. So add guideline along points. Okay, and then if you want to show and hide them, you can bring that up here. If you want to delete them, you can right click on a guideline and choose delete guideline or delete all guidelines. Another option I'm going to show you is the ability to now lock individual patterns, or all the patterns were already there, but now you can lock a single pattern. So I can right click on the pattern and choose lock pattern. Okay, and then those a user can't select them, can't edit them, or move them around. To unlock them, you can just right click in your background and choose unlock all pattern outlines. So that wasn't there before. You could lock all your patterns, but not a single one. Next, I'm going to show an option that was added to the offset pattern outline function. Say I want to create a fold back cuff on this sleeve. If you right click on the segment, you will have offset as pattern outline. So here I'm going to move this out of the way. And I can say I want this to be whatever, a 1-inch cuff extension. So right now we only had these kind of like mitering options as perpendicular or unfilled and right angle. But now I have the option to mirror that angle. So here you see what just happened. You can extend it so it'll continue on that trajectory, make it perpendicular, or mirrors is what is kind of really helpful in a lot of cases. So that option has been added there. And then another thing that's been added is it was changed. The name was changed, but then the functionality was increased a little bit. So if you select two segments that are parallel to each other or adjacent in some way and right click on one of them, this used to be called offset as internal line along curve, but because you can basically use it anywhere, it doesn't have to be in a curved section. It's now been changed to distribute internal line between segments. So now when you click on that, this menu has been available and I can increase the amount of offsets and how they distribute. But now we have this option to graduate the segment lengths. So if I click on this, it will basically not extend them and then try and gradiate that transition from one end to another. So that is now there as a 2D editing option. Okay. Another cool thing that's been added is it's called mirror creation. So just to demonstrate really quickly, if you start drawing, I'm going to start drawing a pattern shape. And as I'm moving, I'm going to right click and choose this option called mirror creation. And it will basically mimic everything I'm doing to the other side. Because this is a pattern tool here, I have to close the shape. So you see it'll follow me. And as soon as I click back on that starting point, the shape is going to close and finish. So that's pretty cool. With an internal shape, you can do the same thing. So I'm going to right click and ask to mirror my creation. Here I can actually change. I think this was also available for the pattern, but which direction that it's moving in. And because it's an internal line, I do not have to close it. I can just double click and end. So that's now available also. Okay, and then there's been an addition to the option to offset or to add a perpendicular line at a point. So if I right click on a point, I have add perpendicular, choose local, but now the option to basically mirror that has been added. So here, if I click both, it'll create two segments off of that point in both directions. That's kind of it for the 2D editing updates. I'll just go through. We have a transparent view that used to be Shift T. Now Shift T reverts back to the monochrome surface view. And then you can actually see the mesh view on the 2D pattern now, which is also pretty cool. And then there's an opaque view, or slightly transparent. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the grading updates that have been made. Okay, this should be, this is pretty cool. We all like grading updates or grading just working better in general. Let me just delete the stuff I have here. And I don't actually need my header window. Okay, so here, the show hide grading it used to be a tool icon here, but now it is over here in the little toggle menu for the 2D stuff. So I can turn my grading on, and basically we have the option to copy grading. So I'm going to add a whole new size group, and I'm going to create a new piece, assign that piece. Okay, I'm going to assign this piece to this size group. And then with the grading tool, I can right click on this point. So here I have copy, paste. So I'm going to copy my grade just to point out here we have our grade rule shown on the right hand side. And I can do a copy and a paste. Okay, and now it'll show that grade applied to this size group. So I have A, I have B, and it's pretty easy copy and paste. So I did the right click, but I'm pretty sure you can do shortcuts of I'm doing Control C or Command C on a Mac. And then I can go over here and hit Control V, and it will paste it. So copy and pasting grade rules is good. Okay, and then the next really great thing is that prior to this, when you would start editing a graded pattern, often you would lose the grade or it would do weird things at these new intersections. But now you can cut and sew and add seam work, and your grading will not get lost. So here I can just cut straight through this, and you can see that the grade kind of assigns to each new point, which is really, really great. And then if I merge this back together, the grade also maintains. And then one last little note about the grading. So here when I have my grade hidden, so I might look at this pattern and not realize it's graded, but now any points that do have a grading have been given a little green highlight around them. It's very faint. As you know, a lot of our lines will have this once you start adding attributes to them. So now you can look at a pattern and immediately be able to tell that there is a grade rule applied, even if you can't see it. So that's great. So that's all I'm going to show for the 2D functionality updates, and we're going to move on to some binding and material stuff. So we can open up this file. Okay, so I'm going to go through the binding improvements. One of the last releases, we added a binding tool. So here it works in the 3D window. Click on binding, and then you can click. There's already a binding on there. Okay, all right, I'm putting a binding on for real this time. So when you first add a binding, it is on the bottom, so you have to select it and ask it to be over. And it will be really small, so I'm going to make this a lot larger so we can see it. I'm going to also add a fabric and make that a contrast fabric. All right, so when binding first came out, it was a little bit stretched out or big, and now we have the option to adjust the length percentage of the binding. I'm sorry if I called this elastic. So now it's at 102. I guess that's a percentage. So if I wanted to shrink this up or make the binding just pull in a little bit tighter, I can go to basically a lower number. So I'm going to go to 94 and simulate, and the binding should tighten up. And then the other thing was that we couldn't really control the fluffiness of the binding. I'm going to make this really wide. Okay, so the bulk of the binding is something that we can control now with what we're calling additional thickness collision. So we already have the same property built onto fabric, and now it's at 2.5, that's millimeters. And I can type in, I'm going to type in 5 millimeters just to show that this binding is going to become really thick looking and really puffy. It keeps switching to textured surface view, so it's a little bit thin. But here now you can see that I can make that binding look pretty bulky. Actually, what people mostly want to do is the opposite, where we take away the collision. So even 2.5, which is the standard distance that it's set to, often is a little bit too thick for people. So you can go down. I wouldn't recommend always removing it completely. I would go down to 0.1 or 0.2. That's of a millimeter, so it's very small. Okay. And so that's kind of the updates for the binding. Next, I'm going to show updates to 3D pen or 3D line. So we have a pen tool that allows us to draw on our garment. I'm just going to draw some seam work around my sleeve. And up until now, we could not symmetrically like copy this or duplicate it as a 3D pen mark. We could only trace it as an internal line and then duplicate it. Okay. Sorry, ugly line, I finished it. So now I can switch to the edit pen tool, right click on this and duplicate to symmetric pattern. So this is, again, just a 3D pen marking. It doesn't actually do anything to your pattern yet. I'm going to just zoom in. So here I've drawn on this sleeve. And again, this is one of the attributes that I can now show and hide on my pattern. I can click on this and I can actually see that reference of a wiggly wobbly line. And then I can right click on it and ask to duplicate it to my other side. If it's broken up by points, you will have to hold shift and select all areas of the segment, then right click, duplicate to symmetric pattern. Okay, it'll take a moment to process, but then you'll see that line pop up over here. Another thing that is new that you don't really have to do much, it's just there that you might be able to see, is that 3D line now shows the actual length of the line that you've drawn. This wasn't there prior to now, so you can hold shift and select multiple segments, and the total is by your cursor. So what I have selected is 6.961, but you can see the individual segment lengths by just clicking on them also. So that's pretty good update. Next up, we'll for that on avatar. Okay, then I'm going to show just one feature that already existed, but now has been added into our garment display, and that's called style lines. So here, the shortcut is Alt-0. I actually use this all the time while working and teaching, but when you click on it, basically it puts a black outline on everything. That was previously, and it still is located in the display. Display 3D garment show style lines was here, but now it's also an icon that you can toggle on and off here. And additionally, you can ask to show the internal lines separate or not. So when you turn it on, it might be on everything, including internal lines. But if you only want it on the pattern edges, if you turn this off, so here, if you look at my top, I have these squiggly lines that are internal lines. I can not see that on my garment. Okay. So that's kind of the update for that. And then the last thing I'm going to show in this particular file is what's called random color surface. So when I click on this, it's in the fabric views. So where you would get mesh view and your textured and thick textured surface. We have what's called random colored surface. So this is to help a user identify just different pieces in the 3D window. I do believe the progression of this update will be that the patterns will be able to have the same color eventually. So you can see, okay, I have my dark orange and pink sleeve. But it's just supposed to help maybe new users kind of be able to decipher things a little easier in their window. It's for learning purposes. I don't think it's more of a design tool, but that's there. It's called random color surface. To get off of it, you must go back to one of the other fabric views. Okay, I'm going to move on to another materials file. Here we're going to go through the options to convert buttons to buttonholes, some new functionality for graphic movement, which gives users better control, a function to align grain direction a little bit better. This is graded. I'm going to hide my grading. Okay, so the first thing I'll show is the graphic movement updates. Before, when you would move a graphic around, there were no smart guides or lock guides at all. It wouldn't snap to anything. And you also could not hold shift and have any control that you're used to with other stuff like patterns. You can hold shift, editing points, you can hold shift and lock your movement on a vertical or horizontal plane. Now graphics also have that. Ooh. Okay. So all you do, it's going to just be built into the functionality you were already using. You would just use your transform graphic tool, and then as you're moving, you can hold shift. So I can shift this down, and you can also rotate by angle percentage. So here, if I'm rotating, moving, if you right click while you're in the middle of this action, I can adjust that by angle percentage. Okay, I'm going to delete this graphic for the rest of this demo. Okay, so next I'm going to show aligning the grain line to a particular segment. So to demonstrate that, I'm going to show an example where I'm going to add some fullness into the back here and shift out my center back area. So just give me a minute here. I'm going to grab that and move a little bit. So say I was developing something and I do have a center back seam. Maybe I'm going to have a pleat there in the end, but I just added a bunch of fullness. Now, if I actually show my grain line, it's really faint. Let me show it on this particular pattern. So we can see here now, though, just this little arrow. Let me hide my baseline so it's easier to see that. Okay, so we have this marking here that's showing the grain direction, but in reality, I would want this grain to get realigned to the center back. So now if you right click on a pattern piece, you have to be on this tool first. You click on transform texture, edit texture, then you click on the pattern that has the grain you need to adjust. And then when you right click there, you're gonna have the option to align grain parallel to selected. So then I click that and you'll notice as I hover around, my grain line starts to move and follow whatever I have selected. So here I can click that center back line and now my grain direction is marked as following that, which is fine. It may look like it's crooked here. That's a quick fix. So I'm going to right click on that. And this is just actually rotating the piece. This has nothing to do with the grain line. So I'm going to rotate it. There we go. Okay, so now my piece is upright and my grain line is aligned with the new center back area, which is great. All right, so next I'm going to show just a simple update about converting buttons to buttonholes and vice versa. Basically that buttons and buttonholes will now copy when you copy a piece. But first, so I have this vent here, or panel on the side where I have buttons. Say you've decided now instead I want this overlap to go in the opposite direction. So to do that, I would need my buttons and buttonholes completely switched. So first, to do this, I'm going to hide actually some of my pieces. I'm going to hide the sleeve, so this stuff isn't in my way as I'm working, and you can all see better. So with our edit buttonhole tool, these buttons are fastened, and when you do this, it's automatically going to become unfastened. But I can select these buttons, right click on them, and ask them to convert to a buttonhole. So I'm going to click on that. It's going to do its thing. Everything's going to unfasten. Okay. And now on this side, I want to convert these into buttonholes. So here I can select this group, right click, convert to button. Okay. And then I'm also going to do a thing where I'm going to bring this layer actually to the outside because that's the switch I'm trying to make. Okay. So here that's happening. That quick conversion now allowed me to, within probably a minute, if I was working, to just change this whole detail to just be a little bit different. Oops, missed a button. Okay. All right, ta-da, so that's complete. And then the next step of this, or the next update, is that I'm going to delete this squares left side of my garment. And now I can really quickly make my symmetric clone. And when you do this now, prior to this, the buttons and the buttonholes did not duplicate with it. So now that comes with it. They just do not come fastened. So I'll still have to go through the fastening action. But it's kind of like I don't have to re-add my buttons and buttonholes, which you did have to before. So a lot of great little updates that just allow you to work a lot faster and cleaner in general. Okay, so that's kind of all I have for this file. Now I'm going to move on to some print layout and some more material and some first setting updates. So I'm going to open up this file. Okay. So I have this jacket and I'm going to apply this plaid print over this fabric that I currently have as my body. And I'll shrink this down a little bit. And then I'm gonna update this in print layout mode. So this pertains to the layout of the print on the actual fabric roll. I'm gonna go into that and ask these pieces to kind of reset and arrange. But when you're in print layout mode is when you can really see what this is doing. If I click on my fabric here, you would select the fabric. You can actually do this when you're not in print layout mode, but I'm just showing it here. I can adjust the positioning of the start point of the print. So CLO is always going to take whatever image you throw in there and repeat it over and over again. But when it comes to how it's laid out on the fabric, that was always kind of out of the user's control. So now here where it says position, it's going to be set at 0 by default. But if I go and just arbitrarily, I'm going to type in some random numbers here. You see that plaid relocating and moving around. So I can choose what the X and Y start location is. And then that will affect where it lays out on the garment. It's only going to affect kind of it here. If you clearly want it just different, you know, use your regular tools. Doesn't change that. But as far as when you're utilizing print layout for maybe yardage consumption estimations or just an engineered print, this would be really useful. You are going to want to control where that border is hitting or where your repeat starts and stops. Okay, I'm going to go through questions that we collected and answer them as best as I can. First one that I have is, what are the new assets for the avatars? Basically, they are just additional shoes and poses. It varies really for every avatar. Like the older ones have been given names. There are arrangement volumes added into it, which were not separate before. That's right. We also have like a nude. So if you're doing lingerie or swimwear and you don't want to have that shadow of the undergarments, you can bring in this nude skin. So let me actually demonstrate this on Mara, who I'm working with. Oh, this is going to get risque, everyone. Sorry. So I can click on her and then here, I'm going to click on her body. So this body, I can basically pull this texture image and swap it out with what is currently being used. So that's just merely selecting her. And then here I have the option to swap out the nude skin or put it back on, put back her modesty. If you just kind of click around, it seems that it's more of the addition of 2 avatars, and then there's separation of like hair and poses, so people don't get confused clicking through the folders and finding specific avatars. Okay, so someone wrote, can you demonstrate changing bust point height? When I tried it, my avatar hunched over. Okay, we can try that out. I'm going to do a new project. So the bust adjustment is always kind of a little bit connected, honestly, to the under bust and above the bust, like kind of over the chest area. What I would do is if I just wanted to edit that, I would switch to advanced. And then when you switch to advanced here, I get height and circumference just a little separated. Let's see what. Oh, so the height. That will change the actual like apex level up from the floor distance. And the circumference is what you want to mess with. Oh, Oh, yeah, I see how it's not really so good at transitioning sometimes. Oh, let me bring in a different one and start over. So if you increase the circumference here, it's going to adjust everything kind of overall a little in tandem, but let's go to. Yeah, I'll have to kind of report that as, I guess, not being a great adjustment to be available. Let me bring in one of the older avatars and see what we get. So it looks like any adjustment to the bust kind of has to be made at this point, in which case it does affect the rest of the body. So I'm going to increase the bust to 38 and then switch to reducing the waist and everything else kind of after this point. But it seems like those are kind of the limitations that we have at this time. Someone asked, can you explain again the tech pack? I'll reopen and go through that again. So the tech pack is only available to use if you have a closed set account, and closed set is free. So if you do want to use it, you can just go to the website and make one. And then when you have a file that you've developed, there's a little icon in your CLO program towards the top. And when you click on it, it will launch basically that project file into closed set where the tech pack developer and download exists. So here you would click on this, choose tech pack via closed set, and then it's going to push you into, it's going to basically open up a web browser, even if you have one closed, and ask you to log into your closed set account. And then you're going to have to choose what workroom you want that to go into. And then I'm not going to switch to the website because I'm afraid it will be stuck on that. But then basically you'll see a button that says like download tech pack. It's kind of right out there. And then you will download an Excel file. I'm going to open up the Excel file that I have. And the file will separate the sections onto tabs at the bottom. So when you open it up, you are only going to see one page. Be aware that the tabs on the bottom are what has more information. So you can click through that and fill in anything that you want to fill in. And also, just so you know, so all of the names, the naming conventions of the fabric when it downloads, or any trims that are included will basically follow how you have your fabric named in the program or within the file, as well as like any assets that are part of it. So it'll say default button, it'll say button 3, and your top stitches 2. So here we have some random characters, but you might want to rename them as like single needle, double needle, zigzag, or your class numbers that you're using. Also, just so you know, in the hardware and trims folder in the library, there is a folder of top stitches that have names attached to them. And then there's a folder of the ISO like standard names. So these have naming conventions already attached to them that you can use. But it's a really simple, it's just a matter of clicking buttons, and it depends on like what is in your project and how things are named. But it does a good job of organizing it, and it will kind of evolve as time goes on. And kind of that's what we have for Tech Pack. Someone asked if I can share this studio file with us. I probably can. We'll make a forum post after this with the file that you can download. So well noted, you would like this. Can the base maps for fur be moved on the pattern pieces to a desired location, or does the image scale to the pattern? That is a great question. I currently don't think that you can move them around. Let me open it up and check my file. Even though we weren't able to render, so to see your base maps, that's an attribute you add into the properties of your fabric. You can click on that fabric and we have base maps. I don't have an option to move them around. Let's see if maybe render will work now. Okay, still not working, but I'm kind of doubtful that it moves with it. But I will check and we'll try and put a forum post up about these new fur base maps and how to use them specifically. Because also when you're creating them, what size and how you save them out of Photoshop will have an effect on how they look. So that is something that we can explain in a community post, so it's always available. Someone asked about the floor versus the heel poses, it looks like, and just how they work in general. I have Mara open, so okay, so I'm going to use her avatar, go into her folder, I'm going to go into her poses first. So she's on a flat-footed pose, and I'm going to pull in a heeled pose. If I click on this, it's just going to use the joint and translation rotation. There's currently a bug that we're aware of where when you transition to the heel, instead of her standing up on her toes, her feet push through the floor. So you can see that happening. This should get fixed eventually, but I'll show you first how to put the shoes on and then how to fix this if you are getting this problem. So you can go back a folder and open up shoes, and then I can just double click to pull that in. If you don't want the shoes, you can right click on them and delete the hair of the shoes like that. Okay, but I'm going to keep them in there. So when this happens right now and she kind of protrudes through the floor a little bit, what you can do is turn on show x-ray joints. Okay, and when you turn that on, you're going to see this purple dot kind of like by her torso area. When you click on it, it's going to allow you to physically move the entire avatar up. But when you are doing this, you're going to have to move the either move it with simulation on or move the garment afterwards also. So here, I'm going to turn simulation on. What happens though when simulation is on is that it will move slower. But you can push it up. Okay, so she's not through the floor anymore. And then turn show X-ray joints off. Just so you know, when you go into X-ray joints, if you're on IK, you will not see that little purple dot. You have to be on just the regular joints that don't have the IK, and then you'll have it available to move. But that's kind of the workaround you can do right now. And I'm going to get out of my skeleton view. But so that's it. Then you just pull a pose file in, then put the shoes on, and you might have to move her up or down. Okay, someone asked binding, how to finish the edges of a binding tape when it is not closed, when it is not a closed shape as a pocket flap. Okay, let's try this out, I guess. The ends at this point may be open. All right, I'm going to quickly just make a pocket and flap. I saw what I did. Did you all watch me do that? Okay. Okay, this is one of those places where the show style lines is very helpful. Okay, so now we can see an outline. And let's try and put a binding on this. Ooh. I'm not sure if the tool even lets you end it open. Okay, it does. So I ended in a really random spot. I don't really think it should look that bad. It might flap open, but let's check if you can sew the ends. It definitely warps my shape a little bit. Well, it looks like that's the result that we have. Let me switch to thick textured surface. Yeah, currently you can't, it just kind of free floats. I cannot like physically sew this or attach it. But I don't think it's that awful of a finished look. if you take the collision off, it'll be very flat. So here, this additional thickness collision, it's at 2.5 millimeters. I'm just going to bring it down to 0.2. So because I removed the collision now, we're getting that. But that's the result that you get. Someone asked, is there a way to edit avatar measurements on a converted avatar? At least in the CLO manual, it does say that when you use convert to avatar, that the avatar editor doesn't work with it afterwards. Let me bring in the avatar that I made and just test that out. Okay, so here I have my new avatar. Oops, should have transitioned him over. If I go into the avatar editor, his name was Thomas, I believe. So no, it's only gonna show, it only will be editable for, once you convert it, like the answer is no. It doesn't look like it's even there to change. Because I can tell you that the new update, you can have up like multiple avatars in your window at one time, and you'll see a different tab and you can edit them all independently. But I do not even have any option for this guy that I have in here to edit him. Actually, I can demonstrate. So it's kind of the answer to that is no. Once you've converted to an avatar, you can't go back and re-edit it. You just want to make sure it's kind of as you like it before you hit convert. But so that's the answer to that. Just one thing I can demonstrate quickly that is pretty cool. I'm going to add a few avatars into here. So here, when you do have avatars that you can edit and there's more than one in the space, you'll be able to jump between them. I've tested up to 5 in here at once, and I was able to change and jump through all 5 of them. So that's kind of a new update. So yeah, the measurements can only be edited on the default avatars, and that's basically it. If you use convert, it doesn't allow you to change it afterwards. Okay, so that seems to be the end of the webinar and the end of all the questions that I have. Thanks to everyone who came and attended. This will become available on just YouTube for you to reference or watch whenever you like. We have some notes about forum posts and a lot of great, basically questions and requests from the registration that you guys gave us. And I'm going to sign off. So thank you everyone for coming. Until next time, bye.